So we've got everything up and running. So welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. We've been absolutely overwhelmed by the number of registrations for tonight, and we'll record it as well. So if anybody wants to watch back at a later time, that's nice and easy to do. So I'm actually joined tonight by Phil, who's going to help me keep on track and stop me waffling about unrelated subjects, as I am sometimes want to do. So welcome, Phil. Good to have you on.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Great to be here, and thanks to everybody for giving up some of their time as well tonight, because it's we're all living pretty busy lives. Just to give you a bit of an idea of how the call's going to go tonight, we're looking around 45 to 50 minutes, and what we're going to do is we're going to start by talking through the benefits of using a buyer's agent, how they can help property buyers to avoid making costly mistakes. And then what we want to talk a bit about is what makes buyersbuyers.com.au different from everything else currently on the market. And then finally, we're going to finish it up with a bit of an overview of the market and why we think, and in particular, Pete, who's the property expert, why he thinks it's a really good time to buy. And as Pete mentioned before, there's a lot of people on the call, but feel free to ask questions and using the chat box feature below. We can't guarantee that we'll get to all of your questions, but we'll definitely do our best. So over to you, Pete.
Okay, right. I've actually got a few slides here that we can run through. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint, so you don't need to worry about that. But Phil, can you see my screen okay there?
Yeah, no problems.
Well, now I think we've already pretty much covered the housekeeping. We'll probably we'll keep to about 40 or 45 minutes of the main content. We will have some Q&A time. Probably, I think most likely we'll cover most of the Q&A at the end tonight. We've just got a few late joiners, so I'm letting in. Welcome, Andrew. Welcome, Peter. Yeah, it's good to see some familiar names on the call as well. So let's just get into it and just talk a bit about what we're going to cover tonight. So I guess
Pete, Pete, can I just also say one thing I meant to say to everyone is we've probably got a variety of people on here tonight with all different levels of experience, and we're going to assume that people don't know anything about buying a buyer's agent. So for those of you who are experienced, apologies, bear with us, but we know some people on the call who've specifically come on to find out that kind of information.
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Bill. So yeah, that's right. This will be ground up information. So I think when we actually founded buyersbuyers.com.au some time ago, the company spent a long period in incubation while we worked out exactly our guiding principles and what we were hoping and aiming to do. Well, first and foremost, this is it. What we're trying to achieve is actually promoting the benefits of what buyers agents do, how they work independently and exclusively on behalf of property buyers. So that's our guiding principle, is that we want to raise the profile of buyers agents because they can reduce for all property buyers time, cost and stress. That's what our market research has shown. And we also know from international experience, obviously I was born outside of Australia, in some parts of the world, for example, in the US, with maybe 45% of buyers might actually use a buyer's agent. And in Australia, historically, it's only really been about 2 to 3% of transactions where people have used a buying agent. So in the States, in the United States, in some states and territories, people actually believe that it's mandatory to use a buying agent, as they say over there, simply because it's become so normalized. And in other parts of the world, if you buy property in, for example, Singapore or perhaps India, it's absolutely standard practice for people to use a buyer's agent. It's been less so the case in Australia because we, as in so many facets of the economy, we tend to be a fusion of Britain and America, and it's been less popular. So that's what we're going to be aiming to achieve.
Well, in a nutshell, Pete, you know, what is a buyer's agent, you know, versus the real estate agent?
Yeah, well, I've actually thrown together some slides here, Phil, because I've preempted a few of your questions here. So that's a good place to start, I think. So a buyer's agent is a licensed industry professional. So it is, you know, we used to have this thing years ago where people sort of acted as quasi-agents, you know, bird dogging and spotting deals and so on. A buyer's agent is a licensed industry professional. So you need to be actually licensed to act as a buyer's agent. And what a buyer's agent does, they actually they act independently and only on behalf of the buyer. So they're not engaged to work for the vendor, and they're not taking you know, commissions for helping people to, I say helping in inverted commas, helping people into buying off the plan apartments or, you know, interstate deals. They're acting in the best interest of the buyer. So they're helping to level the playing field by using their industry experience to get the best price and terms for the brief of the buyer. So does that answer the question well enough for you, Phil?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, in the end, the real estate agent, although they might make it sound as though they're the buyer's best friend, their job is to get the best possible price for the seller, and the buyer's agent basically does exactly the same for the buyer, is my understanding. Their sole purpose is to advocate for the buyer to get the best possible result they can.
Yeah, and I actually noticed we're privileged to have Peter on the call today, who's been, Peter Calizos, doing a lot of work over the years to actually promote the importance of independence. There's long been an issue. Real estate has been a sector with a relatively low barrier to entry, and it's often attracted people with commissions in mind. So, for example, long been an issue with people, as Phil sort of implied there, people acting as a white knight, if you like, seemingly acting in your best interest, but actually not. Commissions and undisclosed commissions have long been an industry problem. And this is what a buyer's agent does not do. A buyer's agent is somebody that you engage to help you get the best possible result on an independent basis. So just something that caught my eye yesterday. If you're currently if you're in the market to buy property and you're finding it hard work, well, you're by no means alone. The level of stock actually on the market at the moment, the total number of listings is actually the lowest we've seen, well, in years and years, probably a decade lows. That's partly a function of Melbourne's shutdown, but it's also because new stock is being absorbed by buyers quicker than it can come to the market. So this is one of the ways in which a buyer's agent can help out because they can help people to research and actually access stock, but also help you to act decisively. So there's not much stock actually out there at the moment, and that is one of the ways in which a buyer's agent can help. So
yes, Pete, let's, you know, I think that's you sort of the perfect segue to I think the next area we should cover for people, because you know, it's the buyer's agent's there to look after the buyer, to represent their interests. I gather there's a number of factors a buyer's agent needs to consider to achieve this. So, and especially first home buyers. So can you basically answer the question for those people, why use a buyer's agent? As my mum said, it's not rocket science. Why use a buyer's agent?
Yeah, well, I guess as somebody who's worked in the buyer's agent industry for a decade, we tend to assume some knowledge that not everybody has. So when we actually were in the incubation period for buyers.com.au, we actually did a lot of market research into the main challenges facing property buyers. There's some really good industry surveys out there from Allianz and others. And what they often find, or invariably find, is that for most buyers, buying property, it can be right up there with their most stressful life events. especially first-time buyers, but actually also for upgraders. And that's largely because buying property is not something that you do many times typically in a lifetime. It's a bit like they say the most stressful events: moving house, getting married, and buying property and relocating. And that's absolutely borne out in the surveys. Allianz found that most property buyers will look at dozens of properties. They will typically make offers on 6 properties before successfully buying one. And because people tend to get into this state of mind of the sort of fear of missing out, especially if they've missed out on a couple of properties early in the piece, they tend to then overpay, overcompensate and overpay. I suppose a hidden benefit to a buyer's agent that is not always fully appreciated as well is just the reduction of risk, because every experienced buyer's agent will have a very systematic due diligence process. So a lot of things that first home buyers don't necessarily think about, for example, zoning changes, local development approvals, things like flood risk. There's a whole range of things that if you're not familiar with the process of buying property regularly, and let's face it, why would you be? A lot of things, the risks that go unseen. And that's even before we mention things like sort of the quality risk for new builds, which has become a major industry issue over recent years. So those are the main things that a buyer's agent does. They tend to reduce the time it takes to buy property, but also the time you have to put into the search. Generally, because buying agents or buyer's agents are skilled negotiators, they can help you to actually reduce the cost of the transaction. It's not all about price. They can also negotiate better terms because they will understand the industry laws and regulations and processes. And very often as well, they can help to reduce risk just by guiding people through the process. And just to wrap up on that point, Phil.
Sorry, you finished, Pete. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I think back to when I bought my first place many years ago in Bondi. I mean, I actually thought as a financial services professional, chartered accountant, Big Four firm, I felt like I should be capable and able to go through the process. But I look back and it's actually staggering to consider just how uninformed I actually was. I was buying an apartment, didn't understand how to research the body corporate or the strata scheme, the risk of special levies, all these things which an experienced buyer's agent would know as a matter of course, simply because they do it every day. As a first-time buyer, there's just an awful lot of parts of the process that are missing.
Yeah, I think what you were saying the other day when we were chatting about it, basically the industry or the negotiation process, it favors the seller. That's the way the industry is set up. The seller has the advantage.
Well, yeah, I mean as you said, very often a skillful real estate agent who's selling a property, they'll be the best friend of every buyer that's qualified and steps through the front door. But that, in the end, you've got to remember they are engaged to work for the seller. So, because they are involved in negotiating properties every day of the week, that is their profession. It's very difficult for a less experienced buyer to compete on a level playing field, especially if you don't really understand it in terms of, for example, it's very different buying property in Queensland than it is from New South Wales. The regulations are different, the processes are different. It's very difficult if you're an unexperienced buyer to compete on that level playing field.
Yeah, I was thinking it's a bit like going to court representing yourself against the prosecutor with a room full of lawyers. You don't know the rules of the game. You're standing there trying to represent yourself. You're completely out of your depth from the get-go. Hey, so Pete, what are some of the typical kinds of mistakes property buyers make, and that buyers agents can sort of say, spare people from making?
Well, how long have you got? It's only a 45-minute webinar, Phil. I guess yeah. I mean, we've touched on a couple of them already. I think it's very often underappreciated by people buying property. For example, buying brand new property tends to come with a whole spectrum of risks that people don't necessarily appreciate. Just in the same way that buying a new car is appealing because something is brand new, people tend to be drawn towards new apartments or new house and land packages, but there's a lot of unforeseen risks there. So that is a very common issue that we've seen with some high profile cases in recent years, especially in Sydney, but also elsewhere. That there can be risks that people haven't really considered in terms of defects and quality, and not least because you tend to pay a premium to buy brand new, representing the developer's profit. And when you come to resell, the property is no longer brand new; it's lost that newness premium, and we do see quite clearly statistically, it's much more common to see people losing money when they buy brand new. I think in terms of common mistakes, overpaying is very common because unless you are an industry professional with access to a full sales database, it's actually pretty difficult for people often to get a handle on exactly what a property is worth. A buyer's agent, or indeed any industry professional, will have a subscription to the sales database. It gives them full transparency on every property that's sold in the street or the local area. They will find doing a comparable market analysis relatively easy as a matter of course, whereas I think for a lot of buyers acting for themselves, and I certainly remember this as a first home buyer, I think I had pre-approval for 500,000, and I practically just thought, well, that's what I'm going to spend because I didn't know any better. Whereas a skillful and experienced buyer's agent will have a lot more transparency in terms of market analysis. So that's very common. Buying in the wrong locations is pretty commonplace. Not considering some of the risks in terms of future development and oversupply. But I mean, it's almost a question of how long is a piece of string, building defects, asbestos, special levies. There's just endless mistakes that are very common. And not because people are stupid or, it's simply just a lack of experience because most people will only buy property a handful of times in a lifetime.
Yeah, so you've been doing this for a while, Pete. Is there one mistake that a buyer's made that stands out for you? Have you got a good story for us?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, obviously, every transaction we always do as a matter of principle is always in confidence, but I think it's probably better to talk in general terms rather than specific cases. But I think it's very, very common for people not to think ahead and to actually have almost a strategy or plan. So, I mean, the statistics bear this out. The number of people who buy a property and then resell it within a relatively short space of time is surprisingly high. And that's not in every case, but quite often because people haven't really planned ahead for, is this going to be an appropriate property for my future? For investors, they often simply buy the wrong stage in the cycle or in the wrong property type and end up just with such an underwhelming result that they end up just reselling either at a loss or a break even. So I think it's often just comes back to a lack of clarity and lack of planning. But yeah, I mean, in terms of real horror stories, you often hear of people not conducting a full building and pest inspection, and then of course the worst happens, and you've got roof repairs or structural issues that are very difficult to then remedy later. So yeah, those would be the most common, but the spectrum is very wide.
So I guess a buyer's agent's job is to minimize risk for the buyer and to level the playing field.
Yeah, and to de-stress the process. I mean, I mean, some of the things that this is just on a slightly different point. Um, at Buyers, we have the dedicated market research, and so if you've got some time, check out our website. The address is there, buyersbuyers.com.au. I mean, for example, some of the market research we do relates to the supply of new dwellings, and this is some of the risks that are easily avoidable. And we've made all of this research is freely available, by the way. So check out on our website. There are two particular sections that are worth looking at. Firstly, the We Learn section of the website. That's for people who may not have a property background, inexperienced as to where to buy, what to buy, the pros and cons of property as an investment and a lifestyle decision. And there's a big bulk of work and content there that you can access all for free. Videos from people who've used our services. There's educational videos. So there's a whole lot of stuff you can look at there. For people who are more into the actual market research, and the only way really for me to show you the full benefits of this is for you to look at it yourself. But the We Intelligence section of the website, there is just all manner of research there in terms of areas that are likely to be oversupplied over the next couple of years. There's all sorts of stuff there. As I said, there's educational videos. We do webinars on every city in the country, but a lot of the research here is just unparalleled stuff. So there's market analysis for every state. We've got risks and opportunities reports every quarter. Things like, and this is all free to access, by the way. We've got economic insights for every region, every city in Australia. So this is slightly off topic, Phil, but this is all stuff that people can access for free on the website. So, for example, where it's cheaper to buy than to rent, and that goes all the way down to the regional level. So there's lots of different stuff there that we actually help people with the market research, and that's all free tools for anyone to use. But coming back to your question there, well, those are the common mistakes.
Yeah,
they pay too much, wrong property. They don't really understand the buying process, so they tend to sort of inadvertently miss out one of the key parts of the due diligence. And I think, as sort of touched on there, I think often people misunderstand that buying a new property is not less risky. It's actually the reverse.
Great, Pete. So just a reminder, everyone, if you've got any questions, please put them in the chat box. Pete, I think now's probably, I think you've done a great job giving us a good idea of the difference a buyer's agent can make. In a nutshell, buyersbuyers.com.au, I mean, it's different than, it's a new business. So tell us about it, because you were involved in the genesis of the idea. I came on late in the piece. So what made you decide to take on buyersbuyers.com.au? What has it got to offer that's different?
Yeah, for sure. So I think if we just go back to the guiding principles, I mean, a big, because I wasn't actually the initial founder of the business. I came on board as a co-founder, and I've run a buyer's agency for over a decade. We started up in London, later in Sydney and Brisbane. But the way the industry has grown up, it's been essentially piecemeal. We have a lot of boutique buyer's agencies. A lot of people run one-man band buyer's agencies and then subsequently hire a second person, which is exactly how I started out myself. Relatively few, there's no real equivalent to what we do, which is effectively acting as a national marketplace for people wanting to buy property, but to access the skills of the best performers and the best buyers agencies in the industry across the country. So I immediately just saw the benefit of doing this, and I guess there's a number of aspects that make it a bit different. So firstly, as I touched on there, when people are preparing to buy, we have a panel of buyers agents that actually cover the whole country. So if somebody comes to us and they want to buy, for example, in Sydney, or if they want to buy in Adelaide or Canberra, we can help people to access the top buyers agent in the area, essentially. So our panel and can just pick out a couple there for you. But in Sydney, for example, Rich Harvey with Property Buyer, one of the most experienced and top performers in the industry. He was the REBA president for a number of years, president of the buyers agent chapter in New South Wales. So as you can see, top buyers agents. And if people want to buy, as I mentioned, in Adelaide, when we set about finding the best performers in the industry, you hear the same names just come up over and over again. Jess Ellen in Adelaide, everybody in the industry said she's the top performer, that's your go-to person. Likewise, in Canberra, the top buyers agent, Claire Corby. People across the industry know these guys as the top performers. Claire's a REBA member. She knows Adelaide, so knows Canberra inside out from having grown up there. Also, we've got on the panel Michael Ramsey, who was a founding member of REBA back in the day. So that's one of the things that we do.
Pete, the core offering here, isn't it, is that we've actually, and why what we're doing is disruptive, is that we've actually designed some packages in such a way that for the first time, the services of a buyer's agent is affordable to everybody, to a much broader cross-section of the community. I mean, historically, it's really been something that's been quite boutique. It's been for investors. And for a long time, it frustrated you that it wasn't something available to the people who really could do with the service, first home buyers, inexperienced buyers. And so what we've come up with here, what makes it special, is the fact that it's actually affordable. We've created some affordable packages.
Yeah, so I think, you'll probably need to read the website rather than my slides here to get the detail there. But I guess if you come back to the guiding principles, this is what we wanted to achieve. We wanted every person who buys a property, not just affluent home buyers and investors, everybody to get access to a top buyer's agent assistance, because in many other countries, that is exactly how the process works. It's not just 2 or 3% of buyers. In some cases, it's 100% of buyers have somebody acting in their best interests to reduce time, cost, and especially risk. And the problem we were looking to solve there, and I think the reason the current model came about, I think we already touched on, is that buyer's agencies have gradually become more popular in Australia. It's sort of grown as an industry, but it's grown up piecemeal. And I know this from my own experience. We tend to generally just look for full service transactions. Very often investors are preferred because they tend to buy less emotionally. It's much more about the numbers. So buyers agencies have naturally gravitated towards the more affluent buyers and investors, myself included. That's it's just the nature of the industry. The problem we were looking to solve there, though, is there's a whole range of buyers, and there's 550,000 transactions in the established market on average every year. It might be less this year because of COVID. But that's an awful lot of transactions there that people are not getting professional assistance. So as you mentioned there, Phil, we've actually come up with a range of packages there. Now, for people who want full service buyers agency services, then we can still offer that. So people wanting to buy investment properties in, for example, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, wherever, full service buyers agency is still something that we can offer. Likewise, if people want some assistance to bid at auction, we have an auction bidding package. But I think one of the pieces of the puzzle that was missing is a more affordable alternative for people who don't necessarily have the budget to use a full service buyer's agent. that often incorporates the less affluent buyer or the first home buyer. And that was something that really got me on board with the whole project, is that first home buyers are the people who need the most help because they have zero experience of buying property by definition. And now, perhaps more than ever, the first step onto the housing ladder in many ways is the most important because that helps people with their next step and their next step. And it's absolutely critical that people don't get it wrong. And it really is heartbreaking to read some of these stories where people have bought badly as their first transaction, and then it becomes very difficult then for them subsequently to actually correct that mistake. So what that package does, the We Buy service, it focuses to make it more affordable to the buyer. It's not a full search and it's not an end-to-end service, but it just helps people with the key aspects, the due diligence, the negotiation, the acquisition through to settlement. Those are areas where an experienced buyer's agent can offer a lot of value add, especially on the price negotiation, because they do that as a matter of course every day. So that, in answer to your question there, Phil.
Walk us through We Buy. I think because that's really the core strategy of buyersbuyers.com.au. I mean, for those people on the call who are looking at buying a property, they're interested to know about our service. What were the other steps they're going to take on We Buy?
Yeah, so and there is a balancing act to be found here because you're not going to get the full level of service that you obviously get from a full service product. But very often, especially with home buyers, we find that people actually know the suburb they want to buy in. They often even know the streets or the property type that they want to buy in. They've got a rough idea of their budget. So where that's the case, the person buying the property can actually bring the properties for consideration to the buyer's agent, at which point the buyer's agent can then step in and say, right, we can actually help you here by running a property profile report, look at comparable market sales, look at the steps of the due diligence process to go through. So they can actually pick up the search from that point. So it's different from a full end-to-end service where the buyer's agent will spend time at the beginning on the brief, on the strategy. It's actually just bringing in the buyer's agent at the point of purchase to step them through the comparable market analysis and a property report, B, the negotiation on the price and terms, and C, just stepping them through the due diligence process of buying a property. Now, as I mentioned, this is where the buyer's agent can really add value very quickly because the process is different in different states. So for better or worse, that's the way real estate has evolved in Australia. It's a different process buying in Sydney where you might make an unconditional offer, you might waive the cooling off period. That's much less common in Brisbane, for example. And a buyer's agent can just step you through the due diligence and the process of acquiring the property because it's very easy as a property buyer to be overwhelmed by all of the different considerations if you don't have that systematic approach. So that's where the buyer's agent can add so much value so easily just by helping people. It stops people becoming overwhelmed because you've got a process to follow.
I really like the We Buy package. I always, when I talk to friends and colleagues about it, I say I'd sell it to my grandmother. You know, it's a total win-win package. Basically, the way it works is you find a property you want, you pay a registration fee of, what's the registration, Pete? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Well, there's a non-refundable engagement fee of $2,950 plus GST.
That's right, and then the success fee is?
We're currently working on just, it's 2,000 plus GST. So it's a very different product from actually a full end-to-end service where typically people pay a larger success fee essentially. Now, obviously, to get access to the best buyer's agents, you're going to need to pay a non-refundable engagement fee. And there is also a limit on how many properties can be brought for consideration and serious offers made on it. We can't, unfortunately, can't offer just an open-ended service there. But as an entry level for people who don't have the budget for a full-service buyer's agent fee, it just gives them an alternative. And yeah, as we mentioned, especially for first home buyers, I think it's fine if you've got affluent parents and the bank of mum and dad can come to the rescue. But the reality is, for most first time buyers, myself included, we just didn't have that luxury. And I would have given anything to have access to some professional guidance. I mean, for one thing, it would have stopped me. I probably would have saved the feedback 5 times over on the negotiation, to be honest.
I think that's the point, Pete. I think that's the point. You know, the awesome thing about We Buy is the only question you need to ask yourself is an experienced buyer's agent who's in the market every day negotiating, knows all of the tricks of the trade, are they likely to negotiate a $5,000 better sale price than you can do yourself? And to me, if the answer is yes to that, and I would have thought for most people it would be, then it's kind of a no-brainer because the package pays for itself. That's why I think it's so awesome, because you eliminate all those risks that you spoke about before. The package pretty much pays for itself. There's no, stress is reduced. It truly is, the whole win-win thing sounds like such a cliche, but I reckon with this package, it really is.
Yeah, I mean, you would like to think that for most buyers that's a cost-neutral service because, I take my own case as an example. I had a $500,000 budget. I essentially found a property that had been reduced from near enough 540 to 500, and I didn't know any better in terms of negotiation and just spent the full amount. Looking back with the experience of a dozen years of experience plus hindsight, I mean, I could have easily negotiated a lower price, maybe 485 or 482, 500 or whatever it may be. Now, I could have paid for some assistance, but I just didn't have the knowledge or the inclination back then. But this is where an experienced buyer's agent, even just for a small fee on a We Buy package, can save you substantially. Plus, you get the benefits of the due diligence and the processes that they go through, just guidance as well.
So, okay, so I think we've pretty much covered everything that we've got there to cover. Buyers.com.au, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. Pete, there's a lot of noise in the market at the moment about the state of property, a lot of negativity, but I know you're feeling quite bullish. So I thought it might be useful for people who have stuck it out with us this long to give them a bit of an overview of why you think it's actually a great time to be thinking about buying in the market, getting ready for it.
Yeah, I think I suppose that one of the things with media is that, I mean, there are always, and I do mean always, there are people out there that effectively make a living from selling doom and gloom stories. I mean, sometimes there may be, something in some of those, but the reality is we've seen interest rates falling, and they are actually continuing to fall. If you look at what's happening with monetary policy, key indicators, look at government bond yields for the 3-year, which is the key funding benchmark. Lending rates are just continuing to fall, and with competition between the banks, probably we're actually going to see even lower mortgage rates ahead. So if there's one thing we know about the history of property and real estate prices, is that the cost of money, or the price of money, there's a very strong correlation between that and the price of real estate. Now, obviously, there are different cycles. Some markets like, for example, Adelaide, Brisbane, Perth, they're probably at a better stage in the cycle than some other parts of the country like Darwin and so on. But as a general rule, if people are borrowing money from under 2% at the low end of the range and 2.7 for investors on interest only, I mean, that when confidence returns, which is now happening by the week, well, look out, because prices are only going one way from there. I've read all of the counter arguments, and you'll see just put here some of the media have done. This is just from the past couple of weeks. You know, the market research, we're actually affiliated with a highly prestigious firm called Riskwise Property Research. And as their name actually implies, this is they're actually a business that they actually advise institutions. They're first and foremost looking at risk. So it's not a group that's out there spruiking property prices, and it's always a great time to buy. But you know, the research that we've been putting out, as I say, when people are when there are areas that are overbuilt or there's risk, we will say so. This is a piece we did last week. You know, the areas where you really must be careful because the supply pipeline is larger and so on. But you know, we're quite happy to put our money where our mouth is on media and actually making recommendations on timing. But at the macro level, we've seen 5 interest rate cuts in 12 months. The Reserve Bank's term funding facility is doing exactly what it was designed to. It's reducing funding costs for banks right across the board. So without getting too technical, the offshore funding is being replaced by funding from the Reserve Bank at just 0.25%. So mortgage rates are only heading one way at the moment. And whenever you see that, historically, it's been followed by rising real estate prices. At the moment, that link has been disrupted by confidence, but just watch the media follow over the next few months. I think you'll see typically what happens is CoreLogic reports one month of rising property prices, and then everybody comes back in. We can educate all we like, but it will never change.
So I guess your advice then would be to anybody who's thinking about getting into the market, get pre-approved finance in place and get ready.
Yeah, look, I think it's worth saying that there's a few things. One is that, you know, for better or worse with the internet, market commentary has become shorter and shorter term focused. You know, there's a lot of market commentators and experts out there trying to make a name for themselves by being the person who called the pivot or called the timing of the rebound. But for most property buyers, that's really not that relevant. If you're aiming to own a property for 5, 10, 15 years, then what happens over the next 2 weeks or the next 3 weeks really isn't that relevant to you. So we do know from history that real estate tends to work as a sort of a medium or longer term investment. If you're looking to buy and flip, then the transaction costs don't really support that as a great way to go for most people. So I think it's worth pointing out that the record low borrowing rates are very buoyant. You know, they tend to make for buoyant property prices, but you need to take a medium-term outlook. If you've got a reasonable holding period, if you've got some kind of security of employment and a decent cash buffer, then I would say it's a pretty good time to be looking to buy property. But obviously, with recessions come other risks. You know, employment security is not there for every industry at the moment. Tourism, hospitality, some parts of retail. So you do need to look at it in the context of your own situation as well.
Yeah, great. Okay, terrific, Peter. Well, look, thanks very much. I should just say to people also that if they are interested in asking questions, you've put your email address up there. If you wanted to register with buyers.com.au, just go to our website. It's all pretty straightforward. And I think just to reiterate what Pete said before, there's some really fantastic resources on our website. We Learn. Let's see, Pete's just going there now.
There's all sorts of stuff here you can access for free. There's videos from people who've used our services. There's some educational videos that we've put up there. There's heaps of free content. There's a free book download there. There's absolutely. Sorry, I've just got a couple of microphones to mute. 1 second. There we go. But also for people who are looking to actually do some market research, just jump on here. It's all accessible for free. We've got the quarterly risks and opportunities report. But as I say, if you're interested in buying in, for example, I don't know, pick a state. If you're interested in buying in Adelaide, well, here's some, some market research for every state. We cover, um, we've got all kinds of analysis there that you can access for free. But all the way down to the regional level, if you want, and I can give you no better advert for this stuff than just by simply using it. It's all free. You can actually access free property valuation reports with the caveat that obviously comparable market analysis will always be better than an automated valuation. But we've got access. You can just jump on here for free. Things like, for example, you can look at oversupply risk in every suburb. We've got reports on, well, you can jump on here for free and check it out. But we've actually got reports here for every region in Australia. So this stuff is just a treasure trove of free information. And if you're interested in finding out more about our panel, well, so it's all for free there on the website. There's some FAQs there about what it is we do and how it all works. But as I say, feel free to jump on the website there. And if you've got any questions at all, just feel free to shoot me an email.
Great, Pete. Well, look, a huge thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. And it's been a pleasure. And hopefully we'll hear from some of you in the near future. We'll certainly be doing more of these webinars in the future, so stand by.
Yeah, and if you're interested in, we do webinars for every city, every capital city around the country. So the last couple of weeks we've done Adelaide, Canberra, Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. So feel free to jump onto our Facebook page, buyersbuyers.com.au. All information is there and freely available. So
yeah, and
thanks for joining.
All the webinar recordings are on our YouTube channel.
That's a very good point. Thanks, Bill.